We're now going to start learning about Nehemiah. Nehemiah starts in what's called the book of Nehemiah, chapter 1. In reality, it's just a continuation of the book of Ezra. The division into two books, Ezra and Nehemiah, after Ezra chapter 10, is not a Jewish division. But it starts a new account of the same events. Nehemiah was a contemporary of Ezra. And the entire book, as we're going to see, is going to be written in first person from the perspective of Nehemiah. So now let's continue and learn a little bit from the first part of Nehemiah, which focuses on Nehemiah's quest to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. We're going to do some of this in the flip video, and then we're going to continue with some of this in class as well. Nehemiah Parak Aleph. Divrei Nehemiah ben Chachalya v'hi b'chodesh Kislei b'shnat esrim v'hani hayiti b'Shushan habira. It was the month of Kislev in the 20th year, and I was in Shushan, the capital. So Nehemiah lives almost only a few years after Esther, and he is dwelling in Shushan, in the center of Persia, the Persian dynasty, and obviously, as we're going to see in a moment, he's close to the king of Persia. Vayavo Hanani echad me'echai, hu v'anashim miYehuda. Hanani, one of his brothers, well, my brothers, comes with men from Yehuda. V'ashalem al Yehudim ha'pleita, asher nisharu min hashevi v'al Yerushalayim. I asked him about the remaining Jews. We see that the Yehudim are called here the Pleita, the Sherit, the Pleita. We've seen this term before, before the remainder, indicating that only a small remnant of Jews live now in Yehuda, in Judea, who have been left over from the captivity in. And I asked them about Yerushalayim. Vayomer li, and they told me, Hanisharim asher nisharu min hashevi sham b'Medina, those who are left over, the remainder in the state, bira gedola ubecherpa, they're in a very bad state, a very degraded state. V'chomat Yerushalayim meforeset, because the walls of Jerusalem are breached, u'shareh nistu ba'esh, and the gates have been burned with fire. So even though at this time, this is after the rebuilding of the Beit HaMikdash, and it's also even after Ezra has come back to Judea, so the Jews are somehow becoming a little bit more devoted to Judaism, they're still in a very degraded state because physically, because their defenses are very weak, they're living without walls. It's not really a state that's fully developed. When I heard these things, I sat and I cried. And I was mourning for many days. We see the classic Jewish response. I fasted and I prayed. Before the God of heaven. The rest of this parak is going to be a very beautiful prayer of Nehemiah to Hashem. After Nehemiah prays, Nehemiah is also going to take physical action, and we're going to continue and see what actions he took. Nehemiah Parak Bet continues. Vahi b'chodesh Nisan. It was a few months later in the month of Nisan. Shnat esrim l'Artakshata HaMelech. Now we see who the king was. The king of Persia was Artaxerxes. It was the 20th year still, because the reign of non-Jewish kings starts with the year with Tishrei. So we go from Kislev now to Nisan. Yayin lefanav, and there was wine before the king. V'asat yayin v'atna lemelech v'lo yiti ra lefanav, and I gave the wine to the king, and there was no bad before the king. We see now the job of Nehemiah is he's the king's cupbearer, which is not just being a servant, but really being someone close to him in the kingdom, in the king's court. Vayomer li hamelech madua panecha ra'im, and the king says to me, why is your face so bad today? You're so down. V'ata eincha choleh. You don't look sick. You're not physically ill. Ein zakim roa leiv v'ira arbei ma'od. I see that you must be sick to the heart, and I am very, very afraid. Now, you should recognize this type of response because it's very similar to another story which happened only a few years earlier with Esther, when Esther goes before Achashverosh, and she is looking down, and Achashverosh had the conversation with her, which eventually lead to the saving of the Jewish people after the parties. So likewise here, Nehemiah goes before the king, and he's looking down, and the king asks, why are you so down today? What's wrong? V'amar lemelech. And now I spoke to the king. Hamelech liolam yichya, the king should live forever. Madua lo yaraya fanai, but why shouldn't my face be bad? Asher ha'ir beit kivrot abotai chaveva, the city which is the gravesite of my forefathers, of my forebears, is destroyed. Ushara uchlu ba'esh, and its gates are eaten by fire. We see now what he calls Jerusalem. Very interesting. He calls it the place where my forefathers are buried. Maybe he's trying to get nostalgia out of Artaxerxes. It's my nostalgic homeland. Also, he's trying to also show that it's not a threatening place. We're not trying to build a powerful state that's going to be a threat to Persia, but we're really trying to keep the gravesite of our forefathers, our ancestral homeland, not being in a degraded state and destroyed state. Vayomer li HaMelech, and the king says to me, Al me'azeh atam avakesh, what do you seek? And we see now, right before Nehemiah responds, once again he gives the classic Jewish response. Before he asked the king, he first beseeks the King of Kings, Hashem, Vatpalel El Elokei Hashemayim, and I pray to God. And he gives, I guess, a little tiny private prayer. He's right before the king. He doesn't have time for a long tefillah. V'amar lamelech, and I said to the king, after I prayed, Ima lamelech tov, v'yitav avdecha lefanecha, if it's good with the king. Asher tishalchenu el Yehuda, el ir kivrota avutai, to send me to Yehuda, to the city where my forefathers are buried. Once again, he called it that Vavnena, and I'll be able to build it up. So he asked him he asked the king Artaxerxes to send him in an official responsibility. Unlike Ezra, who was sent to bring back the Judaism, the spiritual sustenance of the Jewish people, he wants to help build their physical sustenance by making it once again a defensible place and rebuilding the walls. And the king said to me, and meanwhile the queen is sitting right next to him, Ad mata yiyeh malchacha mata tashuv, how long is going to be your trip when you return? And it was good in the eyes of the king. And we're going to see now, I'm just going to show you a little picture. It was good in the eyes of the king, and he sent me away. He gave me time to go. And here, you're going to see in a moment, is going to be a little depiction of the scene. Here is Nehemiah before the king and the queen. He's the royal cupbearer. And he wants to know why he's so sad. And now we'll continue the story with what happens once Nehemiah arrives in Jerusalem. Nehemiah continues with Perek. I skipped a little bit, but continuing with Perek Bet. Vayishma Sanballat Acharani v'Tovia Eved Amoni v'Yera lahem Ra'a Gedola Asher Ba Adam levakesh Tova Libnei Yisrael. So now we see once again, we've seen this many times in the past. We see the enemies of Yehuda, the Sarei Yehuda, this time Sanballat, who is very upset that someone should have the gall to come and bring good for the Jewish people, for Bnei Israel. They don't want good. They are the enemies. They are the Sarei Yehuda. I went to Jerusalem. I was there for 3 days. Now we have Nehemiah's famous night trip. I get up at night. Ani v'anashim atimi, a few men, v'lo igati la'adam ma elokai notein el libi la'asot Yerushalayim. I never told anyone what God had put in my heart to do for Jerusalem. Ubeima eini mi, ki ima beima sheni rochei ba. He doesn't go with a big procession of animals, only the little animal that he's on. So we see he's doing a secret procession at night to check out the city. He's not making it public yet because he knows that, as we introduced before, there are Sarei Yehuda here who are very much against this mission, Sanballat and his ilk, and therefore he's doing this at night. He's doing this with only a few men, and he's doing this with only one animal. So it's a very secretive mission. And I go out through the gate of the valley that night. Ein Tanin, Vel Pinei Ein Tanin to Ein Tanin, Vel Ashar Ashbot to the Shar Ashbot. He's going out to different parts of Jerusalem. We're going to learn about in class. Ve'i Shover B'Chomo Yerushalayim Asher Heim Prutzim Ushareh Uchlu Ba'esh. And I recognize the walls of Jerusalem which are destroyed, and the gates are eaten by fire. Ve'avor El Shara Ayin Vel Brechat HaMelech. I go to the fountain gate and to the spring of the king. Ve'ein makom lebehema la'avor taktai. There's no place for the animals. Vo'i oleh b'nachal laila. I was going up in the nachal. We're going to see all this in the map later. Ve'i shover b'choma va'ashuv va'avo b'sharagai va'ashuv. And he's going to go to the sharagai, and he's going to return. And he's contemplating the walls. and he's contemplating the gates. He's seeing all the things that are destroyed. Vaskanim lo yadu ana halakti uma ani oseh. And the other people there, the noble, did not know where I was going, what I was doing. Lo yudim lakonim lachorim laskanim uliyeta ose malacha ad kain lo igiti gati. He didn't tell any of the officials who were there, the Judeans and the Kohanim and the Chorim, who are other officials, and the Skanim, who are the nobles. He didn't tell any of them yet what he was doing. He just went himself to scout out the city to see how destroyed it really was. V'amar aleim, and I said to them, Atem ro'im hara asher anachnu ba. You see the bad, the evil that we are in. Asher Yerushalayim chareva, Jerusalem is destroyed, Yusharah nistu ba'esh, and its gates are consumed with fire. L'chu v'nivneh et chomot Yerushalayim. We should rebuild the walls of Yerushalayim. V'lo niyeh od cherapah. They shouldn't be an embarrassment once again. V'agid lahem et yad Elokai asher hi tova alai. V'aptivrei hamelech asher amar li. I told them how God is with me, how the king is with me. V'yomer nakum uvaninu v'yichazku yudeim l'tova. They said, let's go build it, and we'll strengthen our hands for the good. So we see here some very interesting strategies that he uses, that he doesn't tell them their plans immediately. First, he does the scouting mission. Then he tells them how God is with him, how the king is with him, and therefore he gets all the people behind it. And here you have, and I'll just make it so you can see this without anything in front of it. I'll bring it to the front. You have here a picture of what happened when he was going out to scout out the wall of Jerusalem, and we will learn about exactly how he rebuilt the walls in class.